All right, Chris, welcome back. I think we were talking just a bit before we got started. I think this will be our first rebranded. We are no longer going to be Bully Pulpit. We are going to be Political Fantasy Sports to make it abundantly clear that this is where you come for all your politics meets fantasy sports news and how the kind of the week's political news affects your fantasy lineup for whoever you've selected as your president, congressman, senator on your team. Um, for those who don't know, my name is Justin Schoenfelder, the founder and CEO of Fantasy Elect, where we're bringing fantasy politics to fantasy sports to politics. And I think this time I'm going to let you all know that my point of view is that I am provocatively moderate, which I think kind of might piss people off on both sides, but we try to, I'm going to be open and honest with how I think. And my co-host here is Chris. I'll let you introduce yourself, Chris. Okay, everyone is going to want to know why their engine isn't running well on their fantasy picks if they didn't win last week. We'll get into the contest that we had running last week. Eleanor Holmes Norton was one of them. First, I really want to start with what I think is maybe the biggest political news, and I feel like the Biden campaign has been listening to our show. The executive order on the border. Uh, taking flack on both sides is the life of being the incumbent in an election, maybe. But what's your take? What's your take on the executive order, which seems to not really deviate much from an executive order that was challenged in the courts and will likely be challenged again and may not prevail. So what's your take on the this action? He's 82 years old. He doesn't move so fast, Chris. Mm. Right. Yeah, and I wonder if that will end up being the case. I think that there are other situations where that is often the case, where somebody will take an action, execute it horribly. It may have been the right decision, horribly executed. It fails in the desired outcome, not because of the idea, but because of the execution. And then it is promptly abandoned by other people who might pick up that idea and do it well, but they think it actually failed because it was a bad idea, not because it was bad execution. Right. So, my point in that being is that, yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, right now, I was just reading before we came on about this split between Senator Warren and Governor Healy in Massachusetts, both of which are on Biden's, like, you know, uh, reelection team kind of thing, and they're in disagreement of it, right? So if there isn't a substantial balance, if there aren't focus groups or polling that show, oh, this was well received and this was this, it gives ammunition to the Warren side to say, see, this is bad policy, this is a bad decision. Whereas, to your point, it may actually have just been done horribly. Like, it was a great idea, just horribly executed. Mm. Do you think there was a way for him to square that circle? Because I feel like what they were trying to do about that bipartisan comment was lay the problem at the foot of Democrats for not moving forward on the bipartisan bill. Do you think he could have said something like, my mistake when I came to office was believing that the border should be solved in a bipartisan way in through legislation, and I didn't think executive action was the way to do it. I tried to get rid of the executive action and work with the Republicans to push a bipartisan bill. The Republicans have shown that they only want this issue to run on. They don't want to solve it. So now I'm forced. I've understand the situation. I am now stepping in to do what I can as president in lieu of a honest, good faith partner on the other side to negotiate a permanent solution. This is a solution for the time being. He comes out and he says, and it may not even be true why he reversed that. I don't think it was true why he reversed everything that Trump did, but he could then lay it at their feet and say, the reason I did this was this. I did it for good reasons. I was wrong in believing that we could do something like this. I am now making an action until otherwise, you know? Uh, there's a reason I'm not a politician, Chris. I have horrible instincts, apparently. Mm, right. Mm, mm, right. Mm, mm, did yeah. So let me ask you a question. Does the fact that they did this so feebly reinforce the idea of him being feeble? It does, right? It seems like everything. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I feel like he's very. I believe he has demonstrated that he's very decisive and assertive. In other ways, I feel like he's just pitter pattering around the old folks' home when he tries to make a decision. When he's enforces a decision. Like I feel with Ukraine, he's very decisive and he knows exactly what the policy is that he wants to pursue. Right. With this, it's almost like you're doing it and you're not sure how to do it or why you're doing it or if you should do it, and it reinforces this idea of like not decisive and kind of feeble. Right. Right. I want to see what yeah. But the problem with that is that it reinforces the idea that he's not really the one in charge of the White House. And that is something I think that even more than specific issues on, we talked last week about the macro versus the micro. At the macro level, when you see a Trump White House, you believe like nobody can control Trump, that he's doing what he wants to do. And at the macro level, when you look at the Biden White House, you think he's doing whatever he's told to do. Right. And the fact that you're picking up on this and it feels like there's some sort of internal dissent, which is why you're pitter pattering around, it reinforces that idea, whether true or not. It just reinforces it. Right. Right. 100%. And what was the Bill Maher thing? Right. 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 No. Yes, I didn't see the view. I do. I enjoy listening to Bill Maher, whether I agree with him all the time or not. I didn't see the view one, and he is, I think, 100% right. Is that, and I think you're right. Actually, if you were to read the speeches, you may actually not be able to distinguish between the two. But that's not what matters. What matters is the performative aspect of it in a TV kind of world, right, or in a video world. Um, yeah, no, I think that's right, 100%. Last thing I would say about, yeah, go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, so like the last thing on this is that does this shore up this issue for Biden foreseeably? I mean, it's a long way to go still, but does this kind of defend his flank? Mm. Yeah. I didn't write this down, but you raised, I think, a very important point that we never touched on that I think we should just briefly touch on. I think this issue of immigration, interestingly enough, is something that is hurting him in the Black community, because if you look at the way it's disproportionately affected um, inner city, like in Chicago and in New York. And the amount of, I mean, putting immigrants in schools and like shutting down schools that are for poor communities. I think the aspect of this and how it's affecting him on that side, which is a vote that he desperately needs to maintain from 2020, it isn't fixed, and I think it actually hurts him that he goes to a predominantly Black church and changes his cadence and the way that he speaks. I saw on social media Black people at the Bronx thing with Trump, and their comment was, he talks the same whether it's to you or to someone else. He isn't playing at it. He says, he might even say things you don't like. He might say that your community needs to do this. Why is it? Why? He says things that are challenging, and he doesn't pander. I actually think he does pander, but in a different way, and in a way that's acceptable to people. Um, so I think this immigration issue is actually not just an issue of in the middle where people don't like seeing this breaking of the law, but where it's affecting people's economic lives, for poorer people, lower income people. Oh yeah, was it Nantucket? Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Totally agree. This is actually, I mean, this is the same thing in LA. You know, the city will say, "Oh, you can't remove tents from sidewalks downtown. Put that fucking tent up in the Hollywood Hills, and it's not allowed to be there." So it's the same city, same everything. Just the rules seem to be different where there's people with money. The also to come at it from a different way with my my newfound willingness to be provocatively moderate. I think all tax exempt status for churches should be taken away if they're not housing homeless people. And they have so much empty fucking space and they don't pay any taxes on their billions of dollars. So there is I think the real divide that we're seeing is an economic divide, and who is serving that. And, the thing is, this is going to be an election where no matter who you vote for, it's going to be an in spite of, not, despite their failings. I'm voting for this person. I don't see anybody, maybe a few extreme MAGA supporters on the left. I don't really see anybody, but whoever wins this is going to be because they are the spite candidate, not not the because I love this person candidate. That's right, June 6th. Mm. Wow. Mm. Mm, mm, right, 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 right. Mm, right. Okay, so right, right. And demonstrably later in that term, you can certainly say that he was starting to experience onset of Alzheimer's, right? So, um, okay, all right. So tomorrow, June 6th, D-Day, 80th anniversary. Interesting. Exactly 40 years later. That's interesting. We will see whether or not maybe tomorrow will be the inflection point of the election. We'll see. Um, All right. I feel like we should talk about a couple of alleged criminals here next. New Jersey just had its election, kind of your old stomping grounds, being a Philly, Jersey guy. Bob Menendez, the stage is set in what will be a very interesting Senate race. Menendez, Kim, and Curtis Basher. What's his name? Curtis Bashaw. Let me ask you a question. Is it is it almost a guarantee that the Republicans going to win with a split on the Menendez Kim side? Do you think? Mm, mm, hmm. Right. That's my thinking. I can't believe that the Republican Senate committee isn't pouring money into this race. It seems like a pickup for them. Was it too late by the time Menendez was charged for this for the National Party to put a strong candidate in? Mm. Y- Yeah, I mean, I think it would be just kind of like beautiful in a way, like in a kind of unexpected way for the change of control of the Senate to actually happen because of New Jersey, eh, rather than Montana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where there's these battles for the Senate. And it ends up being because of a guy who's alleged and seems to be a pretty good case against this dirtbag, that he's the spoiler that hands it to the hands the Senate to the Republicans. I think that would be amazing. I think like that would be incredible. Mm. Mm. Right. Wow. Right. Mm. Yeah. Right. 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 Speaking of Texas, I saw that the on the congressional side, the Republican Congressional Committee, um, they are now targeting Cuellar's seat in the San Antonio to Laredo district. Uh, Makes sense, I guess. He's being indicted on money laundering and multiple other charges. So, um, it, let me ask: does that seat flip, or I mean, it's a little late now. The way that those charges came out, he's the candidate. You're either voting for. eh, Well, interestingly enough, it's very similar to the presidential election a little bit, but you're either voting for a guy who's under indictment for some felonies, or you're voting for the Republican. It is a strong Democratic district, but it is Texas as well, and he is under indictment. So, what do you think? They flip it? Hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. I totally agree with you. I've always referred to, I've always thought of it as like medically, right? There's like acute corruption and chronic corruption. And this has been something I've said about the Bidens and the Trumps. Bo, whatever the Biden is being on the board of Burisma, it's like a chronic corruption. It's because of who his daddy was. Yeah. Republicans are like, were you, did you really have the qualifications to be on the board of Burisma? That's a stupid question. Of course not. And I'm guessing half of their kids don't have the qualifications to have the jobs they have either. Everybody in life can get a leg up because of who your father is. And that's like a chronic problem, right? However, while serving in the White House, getting patents for your brand in China as Ivanka Trump, or a $2 billion loan to your company from Saudi Arabia is an acute problem. Those are two separate things. They are both under the umbrella of a corrupt or graft or just seediness. But one is kind of a chronic, it's the way the world works. And the other one is an acute, very acute, like this is a violation of, certain expectations of the way you're supposed to behave in office. I certainly agree with you. I think, first of all, however, looking at the numbers, it was like 35,000 people voted for Cuellar in his primary, and the Republican got 8,000 votes. So I'm guessing it's going to be very hard to flip that seat. Oh, yeah. I, I think that's great. I mean, I agree with that. That isn't that what Trump was? Wasn't that the people sending a message? You know what I mean? And nobody ever gets the message. I feel like, or very few people get the message. I don't think the message is Donald Trump is the best person, or even really the answer to what the problem that they're saying is. They're just saying there's a problem, and we're sending this guy because we're sending a message, right? And it actually, our next topic here is have you seen the Roaring Kitty GameStop debacle unfolding again? It's like history just keeps repeating itself. So Roaring Kitty, yeah, Roaring Kitty, aka Deep Fucking Value, was his other name. It was basically a day trader. It was actually a real financial analyst. There's a great if you want to see a funny movie about him on Netflix, it's called Dumb Money. And basically, while I was in Vietnam in 2021, I think, I was following like Wall Street Bets on Reddit, and he was a poster. He was like a vlogger. He was a YouTuber, and he would just like put his bets after the day's trades had been done or whatever. He made sure that he wasn't violating any SEC rules. He'd be like, "These are the positions I've taken. This is why." Basically, like CNBC or whatever, and the guy who's always hitting the buzzer. And he did that, and he would post in Wall Street Bets, or it got picked up by Wall Street Bets, and it turned into a short squeeze because if you remember at the time, Melvin Capital and Citadel bailed out Melvin Capital, Robinhood, all of these new, at home during the pandemic with like stymie checks, they were going in on Robinhood, and they squeezed Melvin out of business. Melvin Capital eventually went insolvent. And there was a congressional hearing, and they called this guy forward, and he did a thing from his home. It was all teleconference. And they suspended trading on Robinhood, but they would allow you to sell but not buy. It was all rigged, right? And everybody knows it's rigged. So what happens like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago? Roaring Kitty, who made like tens of millions of dollars in the last episode, put I think it was a $200 million position on GameStop now. And his position has ballooned over $1 billion. And people are going all in on it again, because again, that his position is that the fundamentals are still wrong. The institutional investors are actually trying to drive a company out of business. They're not actually betting on the fundamentals. So he's betting against them, and it's gone up. I bring this up because you're talking about kind of everyday corruption and not everyday corruption. There is a great Twitter channel called Pelosi Tracker, and then there's another one called Whale Watcher, which basically looks at all of the positions taken and disclosed by Congress people. Okay, cool. All right. So they now want to investigate Roaring Kitty for what he's doing. And at the same time, if you look on Whale Watcher today, you'll see that they list the names of 5 different people, different Congress people who are potentially going to be investigating this. And the positions they've taken within minutes or sometimes minutes of a committee hearing, and sold and bought at the right time to make tens of millions of dollars. It's chronic. It is a chronic problem. And this is the message that people are trying to send with Trump. It's a fuck you. You're rigging the system. You're rigging it. Mm. No. Right. I love that movie, by the way. I watch it anytime it's on. One of my favorite lines in it that makes me so proud to be an American in maybe the worst possible way. Do you remember when the French, the Vichy commander of the area of Casablanca is like introducing Rick to the Nazi dude that's just arrived, and the Nazi dude's saying, he's basically challenging Rick. He knows he's an American. He's like, how would what would you think if all of a sudden there were Nazis in New York, right? And he quips, and I'm not going to do it justice. I hope people will go watch it, but he quips something like, I guess that would be fine, but there's certainly neighborhoods in New York I'd recommend you don't go. And you watch that moment, you're like, this is exactly right. Like Americans, you can try to divide us, you can try to conquer us, but we're a little batshit crazy. So no matter who you are, you might not want to go into certain neighborhoods. You know what I mean? Yeah. Right. 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 All right. The last thing I'd say, the we can kind of wrap these three things together. There are two things from the news: Lever News, Washington Post, and Epoch. I don't know if you saw about the Epoch, which, by the way, had a stand at the Texas State Republican Convention I went to 2 weeks ago. Um, Basically, Epoch News has been accused, I guess, by the Justice Department of committing fraud to fund their paper, which is an anti-communist China paper by Chinese against the communist Chinese. Very widely read, and we follow it. Very widely read on the right, maybe not so much on the left. Then there's the Washington Post, basically having to explain to all of their millennial and Gen Z reporters why they're bringing in a new editor, because what they've been writing is basically nobody wants to fucking read. Um, it's a There's that. And then the Lever News: Americans are paying 25% more for groceries now than before the pandemic. At the same time, massive stock buybacks and giving away of billions of dollars, major food brands, to their investors. Now, you were talking about bold action before. Let's start with the last one really quickly. Bold action on the executive action on the border would have been well received. What's stopping bold action against what is, sure, there is inflation, too much money, but there's also a lot of corporate greed, for lack of a better word, where they are using it as cover to raise prices beyond what their margins were before, and they are returning billions of dollars to billionaires. And if you're talking about sending a message that people want to hear, what are the limits for Biden? Couldn't he write an executive order saying, I'm directing the Justice Department to invest every company that has done stock buybacks in the last 3 years during inflation? Couldn't he do something? It doesn't have to be that broad, but something quite draconian that says, people say, oh shit, okay. Well, you could even add, for policy wise, you could come out and say there will be a carve out for any company that willingly comes forward and offers to rectify any charges that have been, you couldn't you incentivize a give back to people by these corporate greed people? He nailed it. I gotta say, he nailed it. Right. 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 Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Um, yeah. Right. And you know what? I will say this. I'm not usually in the position of defending Tucker Carlson, but it was interesting when he went to Russia and he went to the Russian grocery store and he was trying to make some points about pricing and stuff like that. And very quickly, people attacked him out of hand. And I think the real question was missed, which is if you go into a European grocery store and you want to buy an American product, now it's apples to apples at that point. Actually, maybe far less apples to apples because they've had to ship it over there, but whatever. Why is it cheaper there? And if anybody who has friends or family in different places around the world, just call them and ask them. Say, hey, if you go buy something made by Nabisco or Kellogg's or whatever the fuck, how much are you paying? And then go look in the American grocery store. Why is it? And it's just like drug prices. There is a difference. So why? Why is it okay to screw us? I think that's the, and I think people are too caught up in like, oh yeah, well that's, what they're paying for bread is, a third of their salary or whatever. But that wasn't the point or shouldn't have been the point. The point should have been, why is there a pricing differential? All right. I'm just going to ask you quickly over under Joe Biden in the U.S. Virgin Islands next, on Friday. Let's say 91.6%. Yeah, I think it's going to. Oh, yeah. I wanted to tell you, by the way. Yes. So all of the votes are not in. You went over on our 86, and she's at 80, almost exactly 80 right now. I just looked at it. And I think only about 65% of the vote is in. So she might push up over that. Yeah. Yeah. It might fall a bit short. John Tester actually did far better than we had. We were very close on Tim Sheehy, but John Tester destroyed. I think he had like 91% of the vote or something. All right. Tim, how do you say his name? Tim Sheehy, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, I think that's it, Chris. We were as you said before we started. I was maybe provocatively moderate and moderately provocative. We'll see. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.